As teachers, what should we really expect from students? The answer is we should expect them to be young men and women who know how to act appropriately.
Did I do that?
Unfortunately, it doesn't always happen this way. In this video, I'm going to break down why I wholeheartedly believe that misbehaving is a choice. I'm going to explain the 10-80-10 rule and how that can apply to your classroom and give you a little sense of peace. And finally, I'm going to explain what I do in my classroom to get the behavior that I'm looking for. Now, if you don't believe me that behavior is a choice, all you got to do is follow your students around for a day. I know you don't have the time to do that, but if you're able to follow your students around for the day, you're going to see that they act differently in different classes. Maybe they act better or worse in other classes compared to yours, but regardless, they act differently in other classes. What that should tell you is that they have control over their behavior. They are making choices on a daily basis on which classes they're going to behave in and which classes they're not going to behave in. At the beginning of the year, I share with my students my expectations of how they should be in my class. But it goes along with the story that I tell about when I first started teaching, how I went over, as the words would say, extra on all the rules and everything else. But then at one point in time, I realized by the time they get to me, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade, by the time they get to me, they already know how they're supposed to act in the classroom. Now, whether they do it or not, that's up to them. But they already know how they're supposed to act. And I'll start asking some questions. I'll say, all right, if you have a question, what should you do? And boom, they raise their hand and they say, raise your hand. I go, good job. That's right. And I ask another question. If you want to use a restroom, should you just walk up? They raise your hand. No. I go, what should you do? We should ask permission. Correct. You know this. If you have a pencil, should you poke the person in front of you? No. They know the answer. So I go through a couple of these things, and once I kind of make light of it, but the reality is by the time they get to me, 6th grade and up, they already know what they're supposed to do. They know what it takes to be a behaved student in a class. Now, once again, if they know, why don't they do it? The answer is because it's a choice and they're choosing to misbehave. Either because they think they get away with it, or either because they're just trying to, do something they want to do with the hopes that, hey, maybe the consequences won't be so bad, or maybe it just might be something else going on. But regardless, it is a choice. Now, I do want to throw this caveat there, and there are some extremes, and we're gonna have to go through the details. And if if you're a teacher, you know the different extremes I'm talking about. Maybe someone with some sort of disorder, something else going on. I remember I had a student one year that had Tourette's. But the ironic thing is, even with Tourette's, even with that condition, he still was a great student. It was just that one little thing. So there's always these little minor exceptions. But for 99% of students, behavior is a choice. 10-80-10 rule. So let me lay this out for you. First of all, I heard this. I was listening to a podcast. It was a business podcast, and the guy was talking about running companies and how he's the CEO of a company. And he said, from what he can tell, that 10% of his employees they are the cream of the crop. They are the go-getters. They are the ones that just do everything a great employee should do. 10% of employees, that's a whole different story. Those are ones that are kind of bringing down the entire ship. And then you got 8% of the workers that are kind of in the middle. And how they're going to act, work, do, and be responsible is all dependent upon the climate of that company. And so he was talking about the 10-80-10 rule. Once I heard about that, I thought, oh my gosh, this is my classroom. And this is your classroom. So the 10-80-10 rule is this. 10% of your students are always going to do great, no matter what. They can have the worst teacher in there. They're still going to come to school. They're going to do what they got to do, behavior, all the other stuff. 10% of students, no matter what happens, no matter the best teacher in the world, worst teacher in the world, they're always going to somehow cause some disruptions. And then 80% are kind of in the middle. And what you have to understand when it comes to behavior, your focus is going to be upon creating that climate in your classroom so you can move that 80% to the positive and not to the negative. So just take a second. Just take 1 second. Think about your own classroom. All right, I got 30 students. 30 students. All right, I got 3 students. That's about right. That are just, boom, they are on it. I got about 3 students that every time they come to class, I'm like, all right, let's get ready for this one. And the rest of the students, depending upon how the day is going and the class structure and everything else, they may fluctuate a little bit here and there. But once you have this classroom management thing unlocked, once you have it down and you have the right climate, what you're going to see is that you're only really struggling with that 10%. And If everything is going well, that 10% actually breaks down to maybe 5%. So you might only have one student every period or two students every period that you really have to put a little bit extra attention on. And a real fast side note, this applies to not just a business, this applies not to school, this actually applies to I think, my opinion, life. Not too long ago, 6 months ago or so, I got in a car accident. And in the car accident, there's about, I won't go into the details about it, but the other party, they had some other people there, and there's altogether, in this incident, were about 10 people. Not everybody was involved in the accident. There were some witnesses and everything else. There's about 10 people, including me, my daughter, and the people in the other vehicle, and then the bystanders. And here was the interesting thing about that. Out of that 10%, out of that, those 10 people or so, I would say 2 of them were everything I could ask for. My daughter was shooken up. She was just shooken up because of the car accident. And I had somebody, a worker from the restaurant, come out, take my daughter into the restaurant, comfort her, give her something to eat while all the commotion was going on, when I was trying to deal with everything. And then the other person, the other driver that was involved in the accident besides me, they were outstanding. They actually came to my daughter and reassured her that, hey, it's an accident, everything's fine. They actually reassured her. This is the other driver, right? So about 10 people involved, 2 of them stepped up and went above and beyond anything I could ask. But then, oh boy, then I had one person in the other vehicle that was just awful. And I won't go into details of what happened, but they were just rude, awful, you name it, trying to stir up trouble, everything going on. All right. And then everybody else was kind of bystanders watching, or somebody that was involved but didn't really speak up too much. But there you go. The 10%, 2 people, awesome. 1 person, roughly 10%, awful. And the rest of them kind of went along with the flow. You're going to see this time and time again at all different places and all different organizations. But the good thing is, once you understand the 10-80-10 rule, then you have realistic expectations going to your classroom. You're not going to expect every student to be awesome, and you're not going to expect every student to be trouble. Realistic speaking, if you only have 2 or 3 students in your class that are causing some sort of disruptions, you are doing a great job. So the goal isn't to get 100% students on the board. The goal, obviously, is to get 99% of students on the board. And if you're doing that, you're doing an outstanding job. Now, if for some reason by the way, side note here, if you ever need help with classroom management, please send me an email. I do a mentorship. I'd be glad to help you out. Or if you want to, in the details below, I'll put a link for my free course in classroom management. But anything like that I can assist you with, please let me know. So what do I do? Well, that is this part right here of the video. So all that said, all right, so we got that down. We got the foundation down. We got kids know what to do. We got the 10-80-10 rule, so you know what to expect from students. But here you go. How do you actually get the behavior you're looking for? Now I'm going to just speak for myself, what I do in my classroom, and I'm sure you can take some of this and apply to your classroom, and you should get the same results. First thing is, I'm very clear on my expectations. I've been doing this for 20 years, and so by now I really know how I want my classroom to be. But if you're new or you're not too sure, you don't have clear expectations, take some time and think about that, and think about every aspect of your class. Think how you want students to act and be the moment they walk in, the moment they leave, when they turn work in, when they raise their hand, when they're in groups, when they are, when you're lecturing, or when they're doing individual activities. Every little aspect of your classroom, I want you to really get clear what you want your students to do, your expectations of your students. Because if you're not 100% clear and there's some gray area there, you're going to finally find that gray area is filled up with some negative behavior. So we get crystal clear exactly what you want. Next thing to do is routines. You need to have some solid routines in your classroom. Routines, right? So I heard this quote. I love this quote. It goes like this: we do not rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our systems. That applies to your classroom. You can know exactly what you want and you can hope for the best, but unless you put things in place that help nurture that environment, help nurture those expectations, you're going to find yourself losing control fairly quickly. So here are some routines I would strongly suggest you implement in your room. One is some sort of warm-up procedure, a bell ringer, something like that, something for students to do when they first come to class. And once, by the way, and I have if you ever want to know what I do in more detail, once again, you can look at that course on Classroom Manager, but you can also look at other videos. Man, I have different videos talk about different things. So you find there somewhere about warm procedures or routines, and that should help you out. But definitely make sure you got some sort of warm-up routine in there. And then you want to have other routines such as transitions. How do you get students' attentions? What you do. Here's one thing. I have a reward system for the class. This is like a little icing on the cake. A reward for the class, so that way the class can monitor itself. You just want to lay routines on top of the routines, anything that helps get you the behavior that you're looking for. And if there is a student that has some very disruptive behavior and I have to discipline on it, I use something called progressive discipline. And the idea behind that is that you apply enough pressure, enough discipline to get the results you're looking for. So not to go to extreme, but just put enough pressure on the student, enough discipline on the student to alter their behavior. And if you can have that, you're going to be able to manage what happens in your class much better.